It is April 2nd, 2026, 2:17 p.m. I'm back to doing more journaling. It's been quite a while. Um, I wanted to discuss some things. Uh, First of all, I don't remember the last time what I talked about or where I was, but I moved to a different country. Um, and a complete different career. Freelancing career, which I don't know if it's gonna work out, but we'll see. My plan is to at least try for 2 years, and if it doesn't work out, I'll think of something else. But the issue is, I'm doing all this with my savings from my full time, and it's running out. So I don't know. I feel like my savings can only last a year, but we'll see. Um, and I've been wanting to journal, but I wanted to wait until I got what's behind me, which is a whiteboard. So now that I have a whiteboard, I thought I could probably explain stuff with diagrams more, especially what was it? Especially like my tell us of life theory. It would be nice to re-explain it with a diagram. So I'm gonna do that. But before, I wanted to think about or talk about the issue with my journaling is that in the past, maybe there's things I said that currently I might disagree or find embarrassing or just I don't like. And it got me thinking about the idea of digital footprint, right? Um, because with our insane levels of recording technology that we have today, um, and our ability, the I guess the accessibility of that recording technology, we've kind of changed how we perceive each other. In that, what I recognize, especially in the chronically online spaces, is how, well, it's not just that. I think in general, I want to say, in at least developed countries where internet's heavily used and there's social media, is that we perceive each other differently through time. And that before, I would imagine that we kind of saw each other as the present individual in that present moment, you know, with, and we also perceived each other as probably more dynamic, of that we kind of change, or at least we are different from the version we were a minute ago. But with this technology we have today, we're not really that. We're not a dynamic entity that changes through time anymore. At least the way we perceive each other is that is this individual almost frozen in time, that it has become a lot difficult for us to acknowledge that the person who was 10 years ago is not really the same person. Or it could depend, right? But I think it's hard for us to acknowledge the possibility that someone 10 years ago is not the same person 10 years later. Um, and that's just something I wanted to talk about, that we can't accept that, and therefore I think there's also that pressure of making sure you do the right thing a lot of times, especially when you become an adult, to say the right things, because everything can be recorded and people can't understand that that moment that you might have said something wrong is not representative of you as a whole, or representative of you 10 years later. That we recognize ourselves more as a static entity because how technology represents us as static, because of how well it freezes time, how well it freezes a moment, and is able to contain within itself, unchanged from its environment, because it's in the virtual space. It's, you know. So that's something I was thinking about, and that's why I was thinking. So that's why I'm thinking about. Okay, there's some things maybe I want to start, at least, was it unlisting in the journals? But then I thought, but what am I trying to achieve here? You know, why do I have this channel? One is to just speak my mind. I think one is because I want to say I'm also more introverted, although the whole introvert extrovert thing is probably not, more of a myth, but I would say I'm more introverted, but I do also crave socialization. So when there are situations where I couldn't socialize as much, I was using this as a outlet. But I want to have it more than just that, you know. And ultimately, it is a journaling device. And one aspect that I want to imbue in this journaling device is my desire to be a bit contrarian, to, or to kind of be against repressive forces, even especially within myself. And I believe by me not unlisting my other entries, I'm being kind of reactive, kind of being opposing to this paradigm we have, which is how we see each other as static entities that could be kind of frozen in time, and frozen glimpses become symbolic of us as a whole. You know, I want to go against that paradigm, because it seems to be a common thing. So that's why I'm thinking I'll just keep what I have right now, but we'll see. It's not like I think I said anything bad. I don't remember. I don't want to go through all of what I said. Yeah. So anyways, the other thing I want to talk about is so tell us of life. There's certain things I want to go over. I don't like my original diagram, because I think there's certain things I don't know if I completely agree anymore, such as the a priori and a posteriori thing. I think I would just chalk it up to our values are conditioned through materials and our ideals. Although I don't like the whole dialectic materialism makes a lot of sense to me, but Deleuze and Guattari talk about how it's wrong because it's negate production through negation or something. I'm not completely sure, but I don't know if they completely disagree with how we are conditioned through our material conditions. Yeah, um, and I feel like they still would agree that there's an interplay between materials and material condition and the ideals. But I'm not sure. Maybe they have a different dynamic. I'm still at the initial stages of reading Marx. Um, I haven't even touched the Capital. There are three books. So I'm thinking after that I was gonna read Deleuze, but then I thought maybe I should also do at least one Spinoza. I just want to get to Deleuze in Guattari, but I just lack the. I feel like I really need to read other texts before, you know. So we'll see. So yeah. So um so I'm gonna go over Tell Us of Life again. The whole idea isn't the whole idea isn't that it is be all end all, like the truth. It's just my perspective and my observation. I'm trying to like organize how we perceive our like life, the point of life. So yeah. I should clean the board. Okay, Tell Us of Life. Yeah. So there basically here the ideal I'm talking about is not the Marxist ideal. It just ideal in a more general sense, like your desire or how you want things to be. Okay, so you have the I, just like for example your goals or how you want to be rich, for example. That's the ideal. And basically ideal versus the real minus the real, just understanding the difference. So minus as in like kind of seeing the difference. I don't know how well you can see the words. Hopefully it's not too hard to tell. And ideal minus the real. Okay. Yeah, I should shall do that in red or underline in red. So my own philosophy on like the goal of life starts off with the fact that we have some sort of ideal and we compare that to the real, and based on that we have some sort of degree in which we're content contentment, right? Yeah, not content degree of contentment. I use the word content, not degree of satisfaction, because you can be content without being satisfied. Content is just more so being okay with how how things are. And based on how big the difference of ideal and real is, how much your content is going to differ. So in a sense, the telos of life for me is focusing on this degree of contentment. But it's not simply that the more content you are, the more you've achieved the telos of life. Now I'll get into that. So I have four different approaches to how we're gonna deal with degree of contentment. The first one, I call it the where should I put it? I'll put it here. First one, I call it fulfillment. First one, I call it the fulfillment approach, where degree of contentment is or at least close to zero. So this is a typical, like the teleological sense of how we're just approaching a goal, we achieve it, and then we reach like a very nice, fulfilled contentment, where the difference between ideal and real is almost the same. That's why it sums to zero. Can you see the light? Yeah, you can kind of see. Okay. So that's the first approach. Now we also have the progression approach. So for progression approach, your ideal isn't your DOC getting to zero. Your ideal is degree of contentment approaching to zero. So it's not about actually achieving the goal. It's rather that you become more content as you're kind of actually, I don't like the way I use ideal. Now, let me redo this. Technically, we are discussing like a meta ideal, I would say. But basically, the progression approach is that our focus is not achieving zero, but rather progressing to zero. That's where we find contentment. Degree of contentment. No, actually, this doesn't make sense though. Degree of, I'll keep it as like meta ideal, maybe. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense, I think. So you have your more lower strata ideal, like getting rich. But on a meta ideal, your your focus, your contentment is more on trying to get rich rather than actually getting rich. And that's one way of like seeing the telos of your life. Number three. Number three is the meta approach. Okay. So meta approach. This is actually seeing your meta ideal. Meta ideal is this equation where I minus R equals degree of contentment. So what is the meta approach talking about? Well, in number two we saw we're approaching towards the meta already, where instead of just focusing on the degree of contentment, the progression approach is kind of taking a step back and looking at how there's a difference between ideal and real, and it's our approach towards the ideal where there's a sense of goal in life. Now, the meta approach is saying it takes another step back and goes real meta and looks at the whole equation, ideal and real equals degree of contentment, and just sees that this whole like push and pull, this whole basically the way life is, where you have an ideal, you have a real, and that's going to affect how content you are. That all in all, as it is already a sort of goal in life. Not that you're even approaching, but just that there is that condition happening. That's where you find that your goal, that's where you find your goal, sort of. That's where perhaps you also find meta content. And then finally we have our last one. Our last one, number 4, is the antitelos. So I didn't even really define telos, but telos means like goal, you know. So it's paradoxical, but within the approaches of telos of life, we also have a approach that is going against the idea of telos of life, where I put. Now, this is not meta ideal. This is just your ideal equals 0. Okay. So this is close to, I think, like a Buddhist nirvana idea of relinquishing your desires. So it's not about, this is almost the opposite of number 3, where number 3, you realize the tension between your desires and your desires and what you have, what you actually have, and perhaps the disappointment or the enjoyment of it all. number four is actually rejecting this whole idea of ideal minus real equals degree of contentment. It's removing that tension between what you want and what you have. And as you can see, if ideal is 0, yeah. Well, the math doesn't really add up. But the idea is you don't really have anything. So it doesn't matter what, the end result is between the tension between ideal and real. The idea is you just don't really care to have a telos. You just are okay with whatever. Or maybe it's not even about trying to be okay. You just relinquish your desire. It's a different order of thinking that I'm not even close to it. But if you go into the mountains and meditate for years, maybe number 4 is for you. So this is kind of my general idea of how we could perceive our goal in life. I'm not saying any of them is better than the other. I'm just presenting different approaches we tend to have with how we deal with life. And then, let's see, another thing, other things to consider, I would also describe this as sort of almost a spectrum of destructibility. Destructibility. So this is a bit of an assumption here, but this whole thing is kind of an assumption, although I base it on some philosophies. What I mean by destructibility is how long that degree of contentment lasts. I see that if you're focusing on just fulfillment, if you can't attain it, first of all, then you're never going to be really content, right? And even after you attain it, you can lose it, or maybe you kind of start wanting something more, to the next fulfillment. So it's very easy for your contentment to be kind of destroyed. But as you keep going down, you go to the progression approach. You don't really attain that goal, but that is still fine, But you can still perhaps lose like that level of meta ideal contentment when maybe if you reach a goal, although you could potentially just want to go to the next goal. But also, if you actually don't progress, if you're regressing, there's a chance that you could see it as your meta contentment being destroyed. Although once again, you could also argue that the regression of your progress is on a grander scale still part of that progress to reaching that ideal. So I would say there's more durability in your degree of in your contentment compared to fulfillment, approach 1. And then we get to number 3. You see that this whole tension of ideal and real is what you kind of want. So I would say it's a lot harder for that stage of contentment to be destroyed. But even then, tension between ideal and real might not always be there, you know. And it's still focused on a sense of desire, right? Desire can lead to disappointments. So even though meta, I would say it's so far one of the more like indestructible level of approach to Telos of Life, it is still susceptible in certain cases, you know. Yeah. But then the funny thing is, even that destruction kind of reinforces that that tension between idea and real. On a meta level, it reassures that there is actually tension, you know. So it is susceptible, but also I feel like at a meta level, it's able to kind of devour, kind of almost like eat its own tail to maintain contentment. Because it's basically amor fati in my mind, number 3. So it's essentially very nigh indestructible. But then we come to number 4. I feel like that's, if you can achieve that, that's the most indestructible form of Telos of Life. Because there is no Telos. It's the relinquishing of desire. So the very idea of desire is gone. So it's less, you know, you can't really destroy contentment, because contentment is not even in the question. But of course, I think in reality, even Buddhists will say no one is like truly just fully relinquished of their desires, you know. The desires come back. So, of course, it's not completely indestructible. But I would say, compared to fulfillment, progression, meta is probably closest to not being able to be destroyed. In terms of maintaining whatever it is. It's like dividing by 0, you know. It's not about contentment. It's not about Telos. It's not about goal. It's relinquishing of all of it. Removing attachments, earthly attachments. So yeah, that's why. And then I have this whole thing about, because the ideal real is not, you know, it's susceptible to affecting each other, right? I guess in a sense it is like the material versus the ideal. There is elements of that. And then you think about phenomenology, hyperreal. The way we think is also going to change how we perceive reality. And that perception of reality can also in turn, again, condition our values and ideals. And then it goes back. So not even in the sense of like material conditions, but just on like a phenomenological level, we still have the dynamic changing of this section of the equation, as well as degree of contentment. So it's not a simple, like there's an equation, there's 4 approaches, that's it. It's more dynamic and complex. But my point is, there's a tussle. Yeah. So that's, I hope that's observable. That's what I wanted to explain coming back. Really, the board's gonna change things, you know. I don't know what to explain next, but I think this was a nice. This is why I wanted a whiteboard, so I can start explaining and drawing and stuff. I'm really scared that the camera didn't focus on the whiteboard, but who cares? Okay. See you later.